The Harrisons' towing office in Newark feels heavy during a foreclosure at 10:30 a.m. Jamal Harrison faces a Beacon Trust banker over an unpaid $11,248. 62 debt, money he secretly used to save his late sister Aisha's charity. Behind the glass window, Shaquille O'Neal stands silently, watching. With 4 NBA championships and a massive fortune, Shaq only came to reconnect with his younger brother, who always refuses his help. Seeing Jamal bow his head under the banker's scorn, Shaq is determined to protect his brother's dignity. Facing strict legal rules and Jamal's stubbornness, what will the giant do to turn things around before the bank seals the doors? 3 days before that office, 3 days before that glass window and that cold ticking clock, there was just one tired man, sitting alone in a house too big for him. It was 11:30 at night in Orlando. The whole house had gone quiet hours ago. Moonlight spilled through the tall windows. It landed across a row of trophies. Dust had settled on top of every single one. Shaquille O'Neal sat on a couch built just for his size. Even then, his feet still hung a little off the edge. He held an old photograph between his huge fingers. The picture was worn soft at the corners. 3 kids stood in front of a small brick house in Newark. They were squinting hard at the sun. He turned the photo over, then back again. The motion felt like it might bring those years back to life. This house had marble floors. It had a kitchen bigger than most people's apartments. None of it filled the quiet pressing against his chest tonight. A man can own every room in a mansion. He can still feel like a stranger inside his own walls. Shaq let out a long, tired breath. It echoed off the high ceiling and came back to him, empty. His mind kept circling back to one name. Aisha. His baby sister had passed away back in 2019. The grief never fully left a person. It just learned how to stay quiet on most days. Tonight, for some reason, it wasn't staying quiet at all. He remembered her laugh from years ago, loud and a little too big for any room she walked into. She used to call him Big Brother Mountain when they were kids. That name still made his throat tighten, even now. He could still hear the exact pitch of her voice when she said it, teasing him for ducking under doorways. He stood up slowly and walked over to a small wooden box on the shelf. Inside, he kept a few worn things from Newark. A faded church program, a small silver bracelet that once belonged to Aisha, a handwritten note from their mother, Lucille, telling him to always look after his brother. He read the note again, even though he already knew every word by heart. Lucille used to say that family wasn't about who had the most money. It was about who showed up when things got hard. Shaq had heard that line 1,000 times growing up. Tonight, it finally felt like something he needed to live, not just remember. His phone buzzed against the glass table. An old friend from back home had sent him a short message. Attached was a single photo. The photo showed a tow yard with a faded red sign hanging by one screw. The sign read, "Harrison's Towing, past due notice." Shaq's jaw tightened the second he saw it. That yard belonged to his younger brother, Jamal. He built that place with his own 2 hands. He worked weekends and holidays just to keep it standing. For the last 3 months, Jamal had blocked Shaq's number completely. No calls, no texts, nothing at all. Jamal didn't want pity. He didn't want his famous older brother swooping in to fix his life. He didn't want to be treated like some broken charity case. He wanted to stand on his own 2 feet. That was true even while those feet were slowly sinking into debt. Shaq stared at that photo for a long time. He turned it over in his mind the same way he turned it in his hands. Tonight, he didn't want to be a rescuer. He wanted to be a brother. There is a real difference between saving someone and simply showing up beside them. He needed to figure out that difference before sunrise. He placed the photo down gently on the table. It felt like it might break if he moved too fast. Tomorrow, he would fly north. Tomorrow, after years of silence, he would finally go home. Morning came faster than he expected. At 7:15, Shaq boarded a plain, ordinary flight to New Jersey. No private jet waited on a private runway this time. No first-class seat had extra room for his long legs. He took a regular ticket, squeezed into a regular seat, like anyone else trying to get somewhere in a hurry. At the airport, he rented an old Ford Explorer from a small rental lot. The car was from 2012, It smelled faintly like old coffee and pine air freshener. Shaq had to fold himself almost in half just to fit behind the wheel. His knees nearly touched the dashboard the whole drive. He drove slowly through the early morning traffic. Old streets rolled by that he hadn't seen in years. Around 8:30, he pulled into the lot of a small diner called Newark Diner. He just wanted coffee and a quiet corner. He didn't want anyone to notice him yet. He pulled his gray hood up over his head. He slid into a booth near the window, half hidden behind the dusty glass. The waitress barely glanced his way as she filled his cup. "Long night?" she asked, not really expecting an answer back. "Something like that," Shaq said quietly, keeping his head down. She nodded and moved on without pushing further. Newark people knew when to leave a tired stranger alone. Two truck drivers sat nearby at the counter. They talked loud, over their plates of eggs and toast. Shaq wasn't trying to listen, but their words cut straight through the noise of the diner. "You hear about Harrison's towing? Bank's taking it today. 11 o'clock sharp, no extensions. Man's been working himself to the bone trying to keep that place open. Real shame what these banks do to people." Shaq's hand froze halfway to his mouth. The coffee cup trembled slightly in his grip. 11 o'clock. That gave him less than 3 hours to figure out what to do. He set the cup down carefully, steam still rising off the dark coffee. Outside the window, rain had started tapping lightly against the glass. Newark traffic crawled past slowly, headlights glowing dull yellow through the gray morning haze. None of those drivers knew what was about to happen across town. None of them knew his brother's whole world was about to collapse. He had heard small whispers about Jamal's struggles before. He never knew the full truth behind them, though. Jamal had been pouring almost every dollar the tow yard earned into something else entirely. A small scholarship fund, one named quietly after their sister, Aisha. Jamal would rather lose his entire business than let her name disappear from this world. That was exactly the kind of man his brother had always been. Stubborn to the bone, fiercely proud, loyal to people who could no longer even say thank you back to him. If Shaq didn't act before 11 o'clock, Jamal would lose everything that mattered. He would lose the yard he built brick by brick. He would lose his name on that faded sign. He would lose the very last living piece of Aisha's memory. Shaq left a folded bill on the counter. He walked back out into the cold morning air. The clock in his head was already ticking down, faster with every passing minute. He parked 2 blocks away from the tow yard, hidden behind a row of delivery trucks. He didn't walk in right away. His hands gripped the steering wheel, so tight his knuckles turned pale. Sweat beaded on his forehead, even though the morning air felt cool. His mind drifted back, almost against his will, to 2016. The Basketball Hall of Fame ceremony came rushing back to him. Cameras flashed everywhere that night. Reporters shouted questions from every direction. Jamal had shown up that evening, dressed in a suit that didn't quite fit right, paid for with money he didn't really have to spare. He stood near the back of the room most of the night, watching strangers shake his brother's hand. A reporter had asked Jamal, on camera, what it felt like to be Shaquille O'Neal's little brother. Jamal had forced a smile for the cameras. Later, backstage, the smile had completely disappeared. They had argued quietly, far from the bright lights. "I don't need your pity checks," Jamal had shouted, his voice cracking with frustration. "I want to be Jamal, not some shadow trailing behind Shaquille O'Neal." Those words had stuck inside Shaq's chest for years afterward. They sat there like a splinter that never quite worked its way out. If he walked into that office now and threw money on the table, Jamal would see it as one more insult. It would be one more painful reminder that his brother saw him as broken, that could shatter what little connection was still left between them. Shaq's wealth, the very thing most people assumed would solve every problem, felt like the heaviest weight in that rented car right now. Money could pay off a debt easily enough. It could never fix a wounded sense of pride. He needed another way to walk through that door. He couldn't go in as some rich savior from out of town. He needed to walk in as a brother. A brother who still remembered exactly where they both came from. There was one man left in Newark who might know the right words. Pop Harris. Pop ran a small mechanic shop just a few blocks over from the tow yard. He was 72 years old now. He had worked side by side with their stepfather Philip, years ago. Back then, both boys were just kids running around in dirty old sneakers. Pop was the last living link to that old garage smell and those long-forgotten lessons. Shaq pulled into the gravel lot outside Pop's shop. The tires crunched loudly in the quiet morning. The smell of motor oil and warm metal hit him before he even opened the car door. Somewhere in the back, heavy chains clinked softly against each other. Pop sat on a worn wooden stool near the workbench. He was wiping down a rusty wrench with an old rag. The rag had clearly seen far better decades. He looked up at Shaq walking through the door. He didn't blink at the sheer size of him, not even for a second. Pop had known him since he was 12 years old, already taller than most grown men in the neighborhood. "Your stepfather didn't raise you boys to be lonely giants," Pop said. His voice was low and rough, like gravel under tires. "He raised you to be a forest. A big old oak tree don't turn away the rain. It don't do that just because it wants to grow up on its own." Shaq lowered himself slowly onto an old wooden crate nearby. He listened closely to every single word. "Jamal's stubborn because he's scared of messing up the Harrison name," Pop continued. He set the wrench down on the bench. "You gotta show that boy something simple. Helping is a family right. It ain't some handout from a stranger." Something quiet shifted deep inside Shaq's chest. It felt like a heavy door finally swinging open. He had been thinking about this whole situation the wrong way. He didn't need to walk in like a rich man saving a poor one. He needed to walk in like a brother who still carried the same old weight, just on different shoulders now. Pop poured him a cup of black coffee in a chipped mug. "Your dad used to say something else too," Pop added quietly. "He said pride keeps a man warm at night, but it don't pay the heating bill." Shaq let out a small laugh, the first real one all morning. Pop leaned back against the workbench, his eyes drifting somewhere far away. "I remember Philip teaching you boys how to change a tire out in that lot," he said. Jamal couldn't have been more than 9. He kept trying to do it himself, even after he skinned both his knuckles raw. "Your dad just stood back and let him struggle, while before stepping in. Why didn't he just help right away?" Shaq asked. "Because struggling teaches a man what his hands can do," Pop said. "But struggling alone too long just teaches him to be lonely. There's a difference. Your job today is knowing which one Jamal needs right now." Pop walked Shaq to the door, one hand resting briefly on his arm. "Go on now," he said. "Clock's still running, and Newark traffic don't care who you are." Shaq nodded and stepped back out into the gray morning light. The drizzle had picked up just slightly since he had gone inside. Somewhere down the block, a delivery truck rumbled past, splashing through a deep puddle near the curb. Time was already slipping away fast, second by second. By 10:15, a light rain started falling steadily over the streets of Newark. The sky overhead turned the dull gray color of wet concrete. Shaq pulled his gray hoodie up over his head again. He stepped out of the rented car into the drizzle. He walked down the cracked sidewalk along Glenmore Avenue, his shoulders rounded forward against the wind. His size 23 shoes splashed loudly through puddles left over from the night before. Every step felt heavy and deliberate. He kept his shoulders curled inward, his head bowed low. He didn't want anyone on this street to notice him just yet. Not until he was finally ready. This short walk didn't feel like just a few city blocks anymore. It felt like crossing into something much bigger than himself. It was a fight to give his brother back his dignity. He took it one careful, soaking step at a time. For a second, his mind flashed back to a cracked driveway court, decades earlier. 2 skinny boys shot a worn basketball at a bent rim nailed to a garage. Jamal always called next game, even when he lost, over and over. He never once stopped asking for a rematch. That same stubborn fire was still burning inside him today, just pointed at a different kind of fight. A police cruiser rolled slowly to a stop near the curb just ahead of him. Officer Dave Miller stepped out of the car, one hand resting near his belt. He squinted hard at the tall figure moving through the gray rain. The figure looked like a shadow that didn't belong on this quiet block. "Hey, hold up there," Miller called out firmly. "Let me see some ID. This whole block is under legal lockdown this morning." Shaq stopped walking immediately. He didn't argue back. He didn't raise his voice or get defensive. He slowly reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his license. He held it out, without saying a single word. Miller glanced down at the small card. Then he looked slowly back up at the face hidden under the wet hood. His eyes suddenly went wide. His mouth opened, but no actual words came out at first. Shaq calmly lifted one thick finger to his own lips. It was a quiet, simple request. Keep this between just the two of them, please. Miller swallowed hard and nodded quickly. His hand dropped away from his belt entirely. I'll keep the area secure for you, sir, he said. His voice shook just slightly with surprise. Nobody's gonna bother you out here. I promise that much. Miller had grown up 2 streets over from this exact block. He remembered watching Shaq play for a local high school years ago, back before any of the championships or the fame. Seeing him now, soaked and humble in a worn hoodie, felt strangely like running into an old neighbor. Just like that, in only a few seconds, everything changed. The officer who almost stopped him became someone quietly watching his back instead. The street around him looked tired in the rain. Old brick buildings stood shoulder to shoulder, their windows dark, and some of them boarded up completely. A laundromat sign flickered weakly on the corner. A man selling umbrellas from a cart called out half-hearted prices to nobody in particular. This was the Newark Shaq remembered, from childhood, worn down but still standing, just like his brother. Shaq moved on down the block. He got closer now to the rusted metal gate of Harrison's Towing. Through the dusty front window, he could already see shapes moving slowly inside the building. He stopped right at the glass and looked carefully through it. It was exactly 10:28 in the morning. 32 minutes remained before the deadline. Donald Gable stood near the front desk. He wore a navy blue suit that looked far too clean for this rundown little office. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. They looked completely out of place against the cracked floor tiles below them. He tapped one gold ring against the wooden desk. A thick folder of sealed legal papers sat right next to it. Jamal sat across from him in a creaky chair. His wide shoulders slumped low with exhaustion. His hands were stained dark from years of grease and hard work. They were locked tightly together on his lap, like he was holding himself in place. He hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night for almost 2 weeks straight. He worked the yard by day and drove a delivery route by night just to cover the gap. A phone sat on the desk between the two men. Its screen glowed softly, with a number that made Shaq's stomach drop the moment he read it. $42.15. Gable's voice came through the thin glass window. It was calm, but sharp as a fresh razor blade. Mr. Harrison, I do understand that your sister passed away. But Beacon Trust does not run this business on sympathy. $11,248.62 is owed. Sign here and leave quietly by 11 sharp, or we are forced to call for a removal. Shaq's hand curled slowly into a tight fist down at his side. Then, just as slowly, he let it relax again. Not yet. Not like this. Not with anger leading the way. He took one steady breath. He gently pushed the front door open. He finally stepped inside the small, cramped office. The doorframe was much too small for someone his size. He had to bend almost completely in half just to fit through the narrow opening. The instant he stepped inside, the small office felt even smaller than before. It felt like every bit of air had been quietly pulled out of the room. Jamal jumped up to his feet, so fast the chair scraped loudly against the floor. His face flushed deep red with shock and sudden anger. Shaq, what are you even doing here? Who told you to come down here? I said I had this completely handled on my own. Gable raised one eyebrow slowly. He looked Shaq up and down with open, obvious disgust at his worn gray hoodie. Excuse me, who exactly is this big guy supposed to be? This is a private legal proceeding happening right now. I need anyone, without actual business here, to leave immediately. He wasn't quite finished talking yet, either. You people are all the same, honestly, Gable added. His tone dripped with cold contempt. Used to play a little ball, think you're somebody special. Then you can't even manage to pay your own rent on time. In the corner of the office, a young mechanic named Curtis stood frozen, with a clipboard in his hands. He had worked for Jamal for 2 years, and had never seen Gable speak to anyone this way before. He wanted to say something, but fear kept his mouth shut tight. Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time to leave, Gable said, turning back toward Shaq with a tight, fake smile. This office has nothing to do with you. He's my brother, Shaq said simply. His voice stayed low and even. That makes it everything to do with me. Gable let out a short, dry laugh, clearly not impressed. That's sweet, he said. Sentiment doesn't pay a mortgage, though. Numbers do. Jamal's hands clenched tightly into fists at his sides. He took one sharp step forward, clearly ready to swing, without thinking twice. Shaq raised one massive arm calmly. He gently blocked his younger brother's chest from moving any closer. His eyes stayed completely calm the entire time. They looked perfectly still, like deep water on a windless day. No fire showed in them. No fury anywhere at all. Just a deep stillness, the kind that only comes from years of learning to answer carefully instead of reacting in the moment. He reached slowly into his jacket. He pulled out an old, slightly worn brown envelope. Without saying a single word out loud, he slid it carefully across the desk using just one finger. Gable smirked confidently as he tore the envelope open. He clearly expected to find a simple check inside. His smile froze halfway across his face the moment he actually saw what was there instead. Inside was not any kind of payment for the $11,000 debt at all. It was a full transfer agreement. It was personally signed by the CEO of Beacon Trust himself, a longtime close friend of Shaq's from years back. The document stated very clearly that the entire mortgage debt on Harrison's towing had already been purchased. 3 neighboring lots of land nearby came with it too. The total price was $1.2 million, paid fully in cash. Gable's phone suddenly buzzed violently against the desk. It vibrated hard enough to slide a few inches. He answered the call, with a visibly shaking hand pressed to his ear. A panicked, furious voice came through from the other end. It ordered him to apologize immediately and sincerely. If he didn't, he would face immediate termination. He might even face legal trouble for his disrespectful behavior today. Gable had worked at Beacon Trust for 11 years, always following the rulebook to the letter. He had never once imagined the rulebook itself could turn against him this fast. His whole career suddenly felt like it was standing on thin ice. The same cold rules he once used against tired, struggling families were now turning around to crush him instead. Gable's face drained completely of color. It went almost as pale as the papers in his folder. His hands trembled badly as he hurried to gather everything back together. He stammered out a quick, broken apology. Then he rushed straight out the door, disappearing fast into the steady rain falling outside. Curtis finally let out the breath he had been holding the whole time. He looked back and forth between the brothers, not quite sure what he had just witnessed. He had come into work that morning expecting to lose his job by noon. Instead, he was watching something he would tell his own kids about someday. He quietly set his clipboard down on the desk and stepped outside for a moment, giving the brothers some space. The small office went quiet after Gable left. It didn't feel like relief at all, though. Strangely, it felt even heavier than before he had walked out. Jamal stared down at the $1 million contract now sitting on the desk. His eyes filled with something far deeper than simple gratitude. Old hurt rose back up to the surface. Years and years of buried, complicated hurt came flooding back all at once. "You really think money fixes everything, don't you?" he said. His voice cracked hard on the last word. "You just turned me into another helpless guy living under your giant shadow again." He pushed roughly past Shaq. He shoved the front door open and ran straight out into the cold, pouring rain. He wasn't running away from the bank anymore. Not even close. He was running away from being saved like some charity case. Shaq followed him outside, without even thinking twice about it. Thick mud pulled hard at his shoes as he crossed the open lot in long, heavy strides. Rain poured down harder now. It soaked completely through both their clothes within just a few short seconds. The two brothers finally stood facing each other in the very middle of the muddy tow yard. A few old tow trucks sat parked nearby, their paint chipped and faded from years of weather. Rainwater ran in small rivers between the cracked pavement. Somewhere close by, a stray dog barked once, then went quiet again. A faded company sign creaked softly on its hinges, swinging just slightly with the wind. Jamal finally let everything out at once. Years and years of quiet pain spilled straight into the storm around them. "Aisha's gone," Dad's gone too, both of them. I just wanted to hold onto one single thing for this family. I didn't want your famous name attached to it somehow. Why couldn't you just let me fall on my own for once? Because that's not what brothers do, Shaq said quietly, rain running down his face. Pop told me something this morning. He said Dad raised us to be a forest, not a couple of lonely trees standing far apart. Jamal wiped his face with the back of his hand, still breathing hard. I just didn't want to be the brother people felt sorry for, he said, his voice much smaller now. He had carried that fear since they were teenagers, watching strangers compare him to his brother every single day. Nobody feels sorry for you, Shaq answered. I drove out here in a rental car that barely fit me just to stand in the rain with you. That's not pity. That's family. He thought for a moment about Aisha, about the small silver bracelet sitting safely back home in that wooden box. Aisha used to say the three of us were like one big, loud heartbeat, Shaq said softly. She'd be furious watching us stand here yelling instead of holding each other up. Jamal let out a broken laugh. Through his tears, the kind that comes when sadness and relief mix together at once. Yeah, he said. She really would be furious. Shaq stepped closer through the rain. His boots sank slightly into the soft mud beneath him. For the first time all day, he didn't shrink himself down at all. He stood at his full, towering height. He wrapped both arms gently around his brother's shaking shoulders, pulling him close. Jamal, look at me right now, he said. His voice was low and thick with raw emotion. I didn't buy this tow yard from anybody. I bought back our home, the one we both grew up in together. Remember how Dad used to punish us whenever we fought as kids? But he always made us hug it out afterward. Every single time, no matter how mad we were. He held his brother tighter. Rain dripped steadily from both their faces. I'm not out here saving your tow yard, little brother. I'm saving my own little brother. Without you standing here beside me, for $100 million is just paper sitting in a bank somewhere. Jamal's pride finally broke apart completely, all at once. It was like a dam giving way after years of pressure. He buried his face deep into Shaq's shoulder and cried like a little kid again. Years of carefully built walls fell apart right there in the rain. The two giants held each other tightly in the middle of that muddy, ruined lot. They slowly washed away 10 long years of painful misunderstanding between them. For a long moment, neither brother said a word. The rain kept falling steadily around them, softer now than before. It felt less like a storm and more like something gently washing them clean. 3 months passed by quickly after that rainy morning. The change at Harrison's towing was honestly hard to believe at first glance. Gone completely were the old rust stains near the entrance gate. Gone too were the muddy puddles that used to collect by the front steps. Fresh asphalt now covered the whole lot, smooth and dark under the afternoon sun. A brand new glass office now stood proudly, where the old, falling apart one used to be. Right next door to the tow yard, a fresh new building had just opened its doors to the public. A soft blue sign hung proudly above the main entrance, freshly painted and gleaming in the sunlight. It read, Aisha Harrison Jex Community Center, in clean white letters. Jamal stood out on the new basketball court behind the community center. He wore a clean work jacket, with the center's logo stitched onto the front. He was busy teaching a group of local Newark teenagers how to properly dribble and pass a basketball. His laugh carried easily across the open court, loud and completely full of life again. The old confidence in his walk had finally come back to stay. He looked nothing like the exhausted man who once sat in that cramped office, head bowed under the weight of debt and shame. One of the younger kids missed an easy shot and groaned loudly in frustration. Jamal jogged over, grabbed the ball, and showed him a simple trick with his footwork. The boy tried again and made the shot clean. The whole group cheered together, loud enough to echo off the new brick walls. Pop Harris sat on a folding chair near the court, watching with a proud, tired smile. He had known both boys since they were small enough to ride bikes down Glenmore Avenue. Seeing them whole again felt like watching an old, broken machine finally run smooth. Officer Dave Miller stopped by on his patrol, leaning against his cruiser just outside the fence. He waved once at Jamal, who waved back, without any hesitation at all. Curtis, the young mechanic, now worked full-time at the center helping kids fix up old bikes donated from around the neighborhood. From a distance, near the edge of the parking lot, Shaq leaned back against the same old rented Ford. He quietly watched his brother, with a soft, genuine smile on his face. He didn't need to shrink himself down anymore, not here, not in this place. He didn't need to hide his height or fold himself into smaller spaces just to make others comfortable. Standing tall and proud felt completely right here, finally, after everything they had both been through together. The real treasure he brought back home that day wasn't money at all, despite everything it had taken to get there. It was the unbreakable bond between two brothers, finally whole and healed again, after all those silent years apart. It was also one man's dignity, fully returned to him, without a single string ever attached to it. People driving past the new center sometimes slowed down just to look at the bright blue sign and the kids laughing on the court. None of them knew the full story behind those walls. They didn't need to know every detail to feel something good standing there. Some of the best things a family builds never need an audience at all. Back in Orlando, that small wooden box still sat on Shaq's shelf. The note from Lucille stayed tucked inside, a little more worn now, from being read so many times. He didn't need to read it again tonight. For the first time in years, he was finally living every word of it. When the championship trophies eventually stop shining under the lights, what really defines a man underneath it all? When the stadium crowds finally go home for the night, what is actually left behind? Is it simply how strong he stands completely alone in the dark? Or is it how willing he truly is to bend down low and lift his own brother back up onto his feet?